The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky surface of Kepler 442b as Dr. Jake Morrison walked toward his research station. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and metal, a constant reminder that this world was far from the green hills of Earth he had left behind 3 years ago. His boots crunched on the crystalline sand that covered most of the planet's surface, each step sending small sparks of static electricity into the dry air. Jake had come to this distant world to study the creatures that made human colonization so difficult. The plasma lizards were unlike anything else in the known galaxy. They were 8 feet long, covered in scales that shimmered with contained energy, and possessed an intelligence that made them unpredictable and dangerous. Every species in the galaxy had tried to control them, but none had succeeded. The Zentari had brought their most advanced neural dampeners, devices that could shut down the brain activity of most creatures. The plasma lizards had simply absorbed the electrical energy and grown stronger. The Vorth had attempted to use their natural telepathic abilities to communicate with the creatures, but the lizards' bioelectric fields interfered with their mental connections. Even the Kree, with their technology that could bend space and time, had failed to find a way to safely interact with these magnificent and terrifying beings. Jake stopped at the edge of the research compound and looked out across the barren landscape. Somewhere out there, packs of plasma lizards moved through the rocky canyons and crystal forests. They were beautiful creatures, their scales changing color from deep blue to bright white as they generated the superheated plasma that gave them their name. When they were calm, they glowed with a soft golden light. When they were angry or threatened, they could produce temperatures hot enough to melt steel and generate electrical fields that could power an entire city. The mining operation on Kepler 442b had been suspended 6 months ago after a pack of plasma lizards destroyed the main extraction facility. 12 workers had died in the attack, and the damage had cost millions of credits to repair. The creatures seemed to take pleasure in disrupting human activities, appearing whenever the colonists felt safe and secure. They would attack mining equipment, power generators, and communication arrays with what seemed like deliberate intent. Jake's job was to study their behavior patterns and find a way for humans to coexist with them. For 3 years he had observed them from a distance using drones and remote sensors. He had learned that they lived in family groups, communicated through bioelectric pulses, and had complex social structures. But he had never been closer than 500 meters to a living plasma lizard, and he had never seen one up close. That was about to change. As Jake approached his research station, he noticed something unusual near the main building. A small shape lay motionless on the ground, partially hidden behind a stack of supply crates. At first, he thought it might be a piece of equipment that had fallen from a transport ship. But as he got closer, he realized it was something much more extraordinary. It was a plasma lizard, but unlike any he had ever seen. This one was small, no larger than a house cat, with scales that flickered weakly between dim blue and gray. Its breathing was shallow and labored, and its usual golden glow was barely visible. The creature was clearly in distress, possibly dying. Jake's first instinct was to call for help, to alert the colony security force and have them remove the dangerous creature from the research area. But something stopped him. The plasma lizard looked so small and helpless, nothing like the fearsome beasts that had terrorized the mining operation. This was just a baby, separated from its family and struggling to survive. Against all protocol and common sense, Jake approached the creature. He knew that even juvenile plasma lizards could generate enough heat to cause serious burns, and their electrical discharge could stop a human heart. But something about this particular lizard seemed different. Its bioelectric field was weak and unstable, flickering like a dying light bulb. Jake knelt down beside the creature, close enough to touch it if he wanted to. The plasma lizard's eyes opened, revealing pupils that swirled with tiny electrical currents. It looked at Jake with what seemed like curiosity rather than fear or aggression. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a plasma lizard did not attack a sentient being who came within striking distance. The creature made a soft sound, almost like a purr, and its scales brightened slightly. Jake felt a strange warmth emanating from the lizard, not the burning heat he had expected, but something gentle and comforting. It was as if the creature was somehow reading his intentions. Sensing that he meant no harm, Jake reached into his equipment bag and pulled out a pair of standard work gloves. They would provide minimal protection against plasma burns, but they were better than nothing. He slipped them on and slowly extended his hand toward the creature. The plasma lizard watched his movement with obvious interest, its head tilting slightly to one side. When Jake's gloved hand was just inches from the creature's snout, something unprecedented happened. The lizard's bioelectric field, instead of lashing out defensively, seemed to resonate with Jake's nervous system. He felt a tingling sensation that spread from his fingertips up through his arm and into his chest. It was not painful or threatening, but rather like a gentle electrical massage. The plasma lizard moved closer, pressing its snout against Jake's palm. Its scales were warm but not hot, and tiny sparks of electricity danced between his fingers. Jake could feel the creature's heartbeat through the gloves, strong and steady despite its weakened condition. The lizard seemed to relax in his presence, its breathing becoming deeper and more regular. Jake sat there for several minutes, gently stroking the creature's head and neck. The plasma lizard closed its eyes and made soft rumbling sounds that reminded him of a cat purring. Its scales gradually brightened, shifting from dim gray to a soft golden color. The creature was clearly responding to his touch, drawing some kind of comfort or energy from the contact. This was impossible. Everything Jake had learned about plasma lizards suggested that they were aggressive, territorial creatures that attacked anything that came near them. Yet here was one that seemed to crave human contact, that was somehow comforted by his presence. The implications were staggering. If humans could somehow communicate with plasma lizards, if they could form bonds with these powerful creatures, it would change everything. The mining operations could resume, the terraforming projects could continue, and human expansion into this region of space could accelerate. These creatures, rather than being obstacles to overcome, could become partners in humanity's greatest adventure. Jake looked down at the small lizard resting peacefully in his hands and smiled. He had no idea that this single moment of compassion would reshape the entire galaxy. Jake carried the small plasma lizard into his research station, moving slowly and carefully to avoid startling the creature. The lizard remained calm in his arms, its scales glowing with a soft warmth that felt almost like a heating pad against his chest. He had named it Spark, and for the past 2 hours, the creature had shown no signs of aggression or fear. Word of Jake's discovery spread through the colony within minutes. His research assistant, Danny Clark, had seen him carrying the lizard, and immediately contacted colony security. Within an hour, Commander Lisa Hayes arrived at the research station with a full security team. Expecting to find Jake either dead or seriously injured, instead they found him sitting at his desk with Spark curled up on his lap like a sleeping cat. The plasma lizard's scales pulsed gently with golden light, and tiny electrical sparks danced between Jake's fingers as he stroked its head. The security team raised their weapons, but Commander Hayes held up her hand to stop them. "Dr. Morrison, step away from that creature immediately," she ordered. "We need to contain it before it attacks." Jake looked up from Spark and shook his head. "Commander, this lizard isn't going to attack anyone. Something incredible is happening here, and we need to study it, not destroy it." Commander Hayes had been running mining colonies for 15 years, and she had seen what plasma lizards could do to humans. The creatures were killing machines, capable of generating temperatures that could melt through steel and electrical discharges that could stop a heart. Yet here was Jake holding one in his bare hands without any protective equipment. "That thing killed 12 of my people 6 months ago," she said. "I'm not taking any chances with your life or the lives of my crew." Jake stood up carefully, holding Spark against his chest. The lizard opened its eyes and looked at the security team with what seemed like mild curiosity. Its scales brightened slightly, but there was no sign of the aggressive behavior that plasma lizards were famous for. "This is a juvenile, Commander. It's not like the adults that attacked the mining facility. And look at how it's responding to me. It's not afraid, and it's not trying to hurt anyone." Dr. Amy Parker, the colony's xenobiologist, pushed through the security team to get a closer look. She had been studying alien life forms for 20 years, and she had never seen anything like this. Her handheld scanner was detecting bioelectric readings that should have been impossible. "Commander, the creature's plasma generation is completely stable," she reported. "Normal plasma lizard readings show massive spikes and fluctuations, but this one is maintaining a constant, low-level output. It's like it's consciously controlling its electrical field." Spark made a soft chirping sound and nuzzled against Jake's neck. The creature's scales were warm but not hot, and the electrical field surrounding it was so gentle that it felt like a mild tingling sensation. Jake could feel the lizard's heartbeat against his chest, strong and steady. "We need to set up a proper containment field," Commander Hayes decided. "I want that creature secured before we do anything else." Jake reluctantly agreed to place Spark in the laboratory's observation chamber, a transparent cage designed for studying dangerous specimens. The moment the lizard was separated from Jake, its behavior changed dramatically. Its scales dimmed. Its breathing became rapid and shallow, and it began making distress sounds that reminded everyone of a crying infant. "It's responding to separation anxiety," Dr. Parker observed, watching her instruments carefully. "The creature's bioelectric field is destabilizing without Dr. Morrison's presence." Jake pressed his hand against the containment field, and Spark immediately moved to mirror the gesture. The lizard pressed its snout against the barrier from the inside, and its scales brightened noticeably. The electrical readings on Dr. Parker's equipment began to stabilize again. "This is remarkable," she whispered. "The creature's nervous system is somehow synchronizing with Dr. Morrison's brainwaves. I've never seen anything like it in any species." Over the next several hours, Jake and Dr. Parker conducted a series of careful tests. They discovered that Spark's plasma generation was directly linked to Jake's emotional state. When Jake was calm and relaxed, the lizard's electrical output remained stable and non-threatening. When Jake became excited or nervous, Spark's energy levels increased. But never to dangerous levels. The breakthrough came when Jake convinced Commander Hayes to allow direct contact under controlled conditions. He entered the containment chamber, wearing full monitoring equipment, surrounded by emergency protocols and medical personnel. Spark immediately approached him, its scales glowing with gentle warmth rather than destructive heat. Jake knelt down and extended his hand. Spark nuzzled against his palm, and the monitoring equipment registered something that should have been impossible. The lizard's plasma generation was not only controlled, but seemed to be responding to Jake's thoughts and feelings. When Jake felt happy, Spark's scales brightened. When Jake felt sad, the lizard's glow dimmed and it made comforting sounds. "It's like they're communicating through bioelectric fields," Dr. Parker explained to the gathered scientists. "The lizard can somehow sense Dr. Morrison's emotional state and respond accordingly." Jake began feeding Spark by hand, offering the creature nutrition tablets designed for reptilian metabolism. The lizard accepted the food eagerly, its scales pulsing with contentment. Other colony members watched in disbelief as the creature that they had feared for so long behaved like a domesticated pet. The implications were staggering. If humans could communicate with plasma lizards, if they could form bonds with these powerful creatures, it would change everything. The mining operations could resume, the terraforming projects could continue, and human expansion into hostile worlds could accelerate. Commander Hayes sent an immediate report to Colonial Command, describing Jake's discovery and requesting permission to continue the research. The response was swift and intense. Representatives from dozens of alien species requested access to the colony. While others dismissed the report as human trickery or biological manipulation, the Zentari Council issued a formal statement questioning whether humans had somehow genetically altered the creature. Decree demanded access to all research data, claiming that the discovery violated several interspecies treaties. The Vorth remained skeptical, arguing that their telepathic abilities should have detected any empathic connection between humans and plasma lizards, but Jake knew what he had experienced. Spark wasn't just a tamed animal or a biological curiosity. The creature had formed a genuine bond with him, a connection that transcended species barriers. As he sat in the observation chamber with Spark curled up beside him, Jake realized that this was only the beginning of something much larger than anyone could imagine. News of Jake's success with Spark traveled across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, human colonies on dozens of worlds were reporting strange encounters with plasma lizards. The creatures seemed to be approaching human settlements with curiosity rather than aggression, and colonists were beginning to experiment with Jake's methods of peaceful contact. On Proxima Centauri B, a mining engineer named Ben Rodriguez was working late in the extraction tunnels when a cave-in trapped him and 3 other workers. The structural collapse had also awakened a family of plasma lizards that lived in the deeper caverns. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a death sentence. The creatures were known to attack anything that invaded their territory, especially when they felt threatened or cornered, but then remembered the reports from Kepler 442b about Dr. Morrison's gentle approach to the creatures. As the largest plasma lizard approached with its scales glowing bright white with anger, Ben did something that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He sat down on the tunnel floor, removed his protective helmet, and extended his bare hand toward the creature. The plasma lizard stopped just inches from Ben's outstretched fingers. Its scales shifted from aggressive white to a softer golden color, and the temperature in the tunnel dropped noticeably. The creature sniffed at Ben's hand, then gently pressed its snout against his palm. Within minutes, the other lizards in the family group had calmed down as well, their threatening postures replaced by obvious curiosity. The plasma lizards not only allowed the rescue team to reach the trapped miners, but actually helped clear debris from the tunnel. Their controlled plasma generation was precise enough to cut through twisted metal without damaging the surrounding rock structure. What should have been a tragic mining accident became the first documented case of plasma lizards actively assisting humans in an emergency situation. Similar stories began arriving from other colonies. On Volf 359C, a farmer named Katie Lynch discovered that a family of plasma lizards had been living near her agricultural complex for months. Instead of destroying her crops, the creatures had been protecting them from other dangerous predators. The lizards would patrol the perimeter of her fields at night, their bioelectric fields, deterring the nocturnal creatures that usually destroyed human food production efforts. Katie began leaving food scraps for the lizards, and they responded by becoming even more protective of her farm. When a swarm of acid beetles threatened to destroy her entire harvest, the plasma lizards drove them away with coordinated electrical discharges. The creatures seemed to understand that protecting Katie's crops was beneficial for both species. Back on Kepler 442b, Jake was documenting everything he could learn about Spark's behavior and abilities. The young lizard had grown noticeably larger over the past month, but its temperament remained gentle and curious. Spark had begun displaying protective instincts toward the entire research colony, patrolling the perimeter of the compound and alerting Jake to approaching dangers. The creature's ability to detect threats was remarkable. Spark could sense approaching storms hours before the colony's weather monitoring equipment registered atmospheric changes. The lizard could also detect underground vibrations that indicated seismic activity, giving the colonists advance warning of potential earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Dr. Parker's research revealed that plasma lizards possessed a complex social structure based on emotional bonds, rather than the hierarchical dominance systems found in most other species. The creatures were essentially empathic, able to sense the emotional states of other beings through bioelectric field interactions. This explained why they had been so aggressive toward other alien species that approached them with fear, hostility, or attempts at domination. Humans were different. They had a natural tendency toward emotional connection and physical affection that other species lacked. The Zentari approached everything with cold logic and technological solutions. The Vorth relied on telepathic manipulation rather than genuine empathy. The Kree viewed all other species as either resources to be exploited or obstacles to be eliminated, but humans instinctively understood that plasma lizards were intelligent beings deserving of respect and kindness. Jake's gentle approach to Spark had been based on compassion rather than any desire to control or dominate the creature. This fundamental difference in attitude was what made the bond between humans and plasma lizards possible. The most remarkable development occurred 3 weeks after Jake's initial contact with Spark. 3 adult plasma lizards approached the research colony, their scales glowing with the cautious yellow color that indicated uncertainty rather than aggression. They stopped at the edge of the compound and began producing complex bioelectric pulses that Jake had learned to recognize as communication. Spark immediately responded to the adult lizards, its own scales brightening with excitement. The young lizard began moving back and forth between Jake and the adults, its bioelectric field pulsing in patterns that seemed to be translating between the two species. Jake realized that Spark was serving as an intermediary, explaining to the adult lizards that humans were not a threat. Commander Hayes watched nervously as Jake approached the adult plasma lizards with Spark at his side. The creatures were massive compared to the young lizard. Their bodies nearly 8 feet long and covered in scales that shifted between deep blue and bright gold. Their bioelectric fields were powerful enough to interfere with the colony's communication equipment, causing screens to flicker and radios to produce static dot. But as Jake knelt down and extended his hand, the largest of the adult lizards approached. Slowly, its scales shifted to a soft golden color, and it pressed its snout against Jake's palm with the same gentle curiosity that Spark had shown weeks earlier. The other 2 adults followed suit, allowing Jake to touch them without any sign of aggression. The adult lizards had been watching the colony for months. Dr. Parker later theorized. They had observed human behavior and noted that the colonists were not destroying the environment or hunting plasma lizards for sport. When Spark had joined the humans and thrived under their care, the adult lizards had decided that these strange new creatures might be worthy of trust. Jake spent hours with the adult lizards, learning their individual personalities and preferences. The largest, which he named Thunder, seemed to be the group's leader and protector. The second, which he called Lightning, was more playful and curious. The third, Storm, was cautious and observant, always watching for potential threats. The partnership between humans and plasma lizards was beginning to show benefits for both species. The creature's plasma generation became more efficient and controlled when they were content and well-fed. The humans gained valuable allies who could help with construction work, provide early warning of natural disasters, and protect settlements from dangerous wildlife. As Jake watched Spark playing with the adult lizards while Commander Hayes documented everything for her report to Colonial Command, he realized that they had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had turned humanity's greatest obstacle into their most valuable ally through nothing more than kindness and respect. The arrival of the Galactic Council's investigation team on Kepler 442b marked a turning point in interspecies relations. Representatives from 12 different civilizations descended upon Jake's research colony, each bringing their own theories about how humans had managed to achieve what they considered impossible. The delegation included military advisors, xenobiologists, and even a few diplomats who seemed more interested in negotiating trade agreements than understanding the science behind the human plasma lizard bond. Ambassador Zektar of the Zentari Confederation stepped off the transport ship wearing full environmental protection gear, despite the fact that the colony's atmosphere was perfectly safe. His three-eyed gaze swept across the research compound where Jake was playing with Spark and the 3 adult plasma lizards in what looked like a bizarre interspecies game of catch. The sight of creatures that had terrorized Zentari mining operations for decades now behaving like domesticated pets was deeply unsettling to the ambassador. Dr. Morrison, Zektar began, his voice filtered through his suit's communication system. The Zentari government has invested billions of credits in developing weapons and containment systems to deal with the plasma lizard threat. We demand to know exactly what technology you have used to control these creatures. Jake looked up from where he was scratching Thunder's neck, causing the massive lizard to make contented rumbling sounds. There's no technology involved, Ambassador. We just treat them with respect and kindness. They respond to emotional sincerity, not technological manipulation. The Zentari ambassador's compound eyes narrowed with suspicion. Impossible. Our neural dampening fields can shut down the brain activity of any known species. If these creatures can be controlled, it must be through some form of advanced biotechnology that you are keeping secret. Dr. Parker stepped forward with her research. Data, displaying bioelectric readings and behavioral analysis charts on a portable screen. Ambassador, we've documented everything. The plasma lizards are responding to human emotional states through bioelectric field resonance. There's no hidden technology or genetic manipulation involved. Vorth Mindweaver Illithren floated nearby, her translucent form shimmering with the psychic energy that her species used for communication. She had been attempting to establish telepathic contact with the plasma lizards for hours without success. The creature's bioelectric fields interfere with our mental bridges, she admitted reluctantly. We cannot establish the psychic connections that allow us to communicate with other species. The Kree military advisor, General Thox 9, studied the plasma lizards with obvious frustration. His species had conquered dozens of worlds using advanced technology and superior firepower, but they had always been forced to abandon planets inhabited by plasma lizards. Show us your weapons, he demanded. What force did you use to subdue these creatures? Jake shook his head and walked over to Storm, the most cautious of the adult lizards. The creature had been watching the alien visitors, with obvious suspicion, its scales shifting between defensive blue and aggressive white. But when Jake approached, Storm's coloring immediately softened to golden yellow, and the lizard pressed its massive head against Jake's chest. This is our only weapon, Jake said quietly, stroking Storm's scales. We care about them. We treat them as equals, not as obstacles to be overcome or resources to be exploited. The concept seemed to confuse most of the alien delegates. The Zentari had built their civilization on technological superiority and logical analysis. The Vorth relied on telepathic manipulation and psychic dominance. The Kree believed that military might and advanced weaponry were the keys to galactic success. None of them had ever considered that simple emotional connection might be more powerful than their sophisticated tools and techniques. Commander Hayes watched the proceedings with growing amusement. She had initially been skeptical of Jake's methods, but the results spoke for themselves. The plasma lizards had not only stopped attacking the colony, but had become active protectors and helpers. Mining operations had resumed under their watchful guard, and the creature's ability to detect mineral deposits had increased productivity by 300%. The economic implications were staggering. The Zentari Confederation's military budget had been largely devoted to developing anti-plasma lizard weapons. The Vorth had spent centuries trying to establish telepathic control over the creatures. The Kree had simply avoided entire star systems where plasma lizards were known to exist. Now, human colonies were not only coexisting with the creatures but were actively benefiting from their partnership. Reports continued to arrive from human colonies throughout the galaxy. On New Texas, rancher Pete Williams had established a partnership with a pack of plasma lizards that helped him manage his livestock. The creatures could generate precise electrical fields that guided cattle without harming them, and their presence kept predators away from the ranch. Pete's operation had become the most successful agricultural venture in the sector on New York Station. Engineer Carol Peterson had discovered that plasma lizards could be trained to perform delicate welding operations. Their controlled plasma generation was more precise than any technological tool, and they could work in environments that would be dangerous for humans. The space station's construction schedule had been accelerated by months thanks to their lizard partners, the Galactic Council's investigation team spent weeks trying to understand the phenomenon. They subjected Jake to medical examinations, analyzed his DNA for unusual markers, and even attempted to duplicate his methods using synthetic emotional simulators. Nothing worked. The plasma lizards showed no interest in technological attempts to mimic human emotional states. Ambassador Zektar became increasingly frustrated as his theories were proven wrong one by one. There must be some form of pheromone release or bioelectric manipulation that we are not detecting, he insisted. No species achieves dominance through emotional connection alone, but Jake was not trying to establish dominance. He was building relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. When Spark brought him interesting rocks from the surrounding landscape, Jake would examine them with genuine interest and praise the young lizard's discoveries. When Thunder showed signs of discomfort from an old injury, Jake would spend hours gently massaging the creature's scales until the pain subsided. The alien delegates gradually began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Every other species had achieved their position through some form of superiority, whether technological, telepathic, or military. Humans had found their niche through something more fundamental, the ability to form genuine emotional bonds with other intelligent beings. The implications extended far beyond plasma lizards. If humans could establish empathic connections with one hostile species, they might be able to do the same with others. The galaxy was full of creatures that had been dismissed as untamable or too dangerous to approach. Perhaps humans could find ways to communicate with them as well. As the investigation team prepared to leave Kepler 442b, Jake stood with Spark and the adult lizards watching the transport ships disappear into the star-filled sky. The young lizard made questioning sounds as if asking why the strange visitors had seemed so unhappy. Jake scratched behind Spark's ears and smiled. "They'll understand eventually," he said. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest ones to see." 6 months after Jake's first encounter with Spark, the landscape of human space had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. What had started as a dying plasma lizard seeking help from a compassionate scientist had evolved into the most significant partnership in galactic history. The research station on Kepler 442b had become the galactic center for plasma lizard studies, attracting visitors from across the galaxy who wanted to witness the impossible bond between humans and the creatures that had once been considered the most dangerous predators in known space. Jake stood on the observation deck of the expanded facility, watching as dozens of plasma lizards moved freely through the colony grounds. Spark, now fully grown and nearly as large as Thunder, was teaching a group of younger lizards how to interact safely with human equipment. The creatures had learned to modulate their bioelectric fields so precisely that they could operate delicate instruments without causing damage. The transformation had not been limited to Kepler 442b. Reports arrived daily from human colonies throughout the galaxy describing successful partnerships with local plasma lizard populations. The creatures seemed to have developed a form of interspecies communication network, sharing information about human trustworthiness across vast distances through methods that scientists were still trying to understand. On Tau Ceti, marine biologist Sarah Green had established contact with aquatic plasma lizards that lived in the planet's vast oceans. These creatures were even larger than their terrestrial cousins, some reaching lengths of 20 feet, but they showed the same gentle curiosity toward humans who approached them with respect. Sarah's research team had discovered that the aquatic lizards could purify contaminated water using their bioelectric fields, making them invaluable partners in planetary terraforming efforts. The economic impact of these partnerships was revolutionizing. Human expansion into previously hostile territories. Mining operations that had been abandoned due to plasma lizard attacks were not only reopened but were achieving record productivity levels. The creature's ability to detect mineral deposits was more accurate than any technological scanner, and their plasma generation could extract valuable resources from rock formations with surgical precision. Commander Hayes had been promoted to Sector Administrator, overseeing the integration of plasma lizard partnerships across 17 different colonies. She often marveled at how dramatically the situation had changed. The creatures that had once destroyed mining equipment now helped build and maintain it. The packs that had terrorized workers now served as protectors and guides through dangerous terrain. Dr. Parker's research had revealed the full scope of plasma lizard intelligence and social complexity. The creatures possessed sophisticated understanding of ecological systems that surpassed most technological analysis. They could predict weather patterns months in advance, identify underground water sources with perfect accuracy, and detect mineral deposits that human sensors missed entirely. Their bioelectric fields could also be harnessed for sustainable energy generation, providing clean power for entire settlements. The partnership had benefits that extended far beyond practical applications. Humans who worked closely with plasma lizards reported improved mental health and reduced stress levels. The creature's bioelectric fields seemed to have therapeutic effects on human nervous systems, promoting healing and emotional well-being. Several medical facilities had begun incorporating plasma lizard therapy into their treatment programs for trauma victims and patients suffering from neurological disorders. Jake had become something of a celebrity throughout human space, but he remained focused on his research and his relationship with Spark. The young lizard had developed into a remarkable ambassador for its species, demonstrating intelligence and emotional depth that challenged every assumption about non-human consciousness. Spark could recognize individual humans by their bioelectric signatures, remember complex instructions for weeks at a time, and even display what appeared to be a sense of humor. The broader implications for humanity's place in the galaxy continued to unfold. Other species were beginning to approach humans not as competitors or threats, but as potential mediators in their own struggles with hostile alien life forms. The Zentari had quietly requested human assistance in establishing contact with the crystalline spiders that had made mining impossible on several worlds. The Vorth had asked for help communicating with the psychic dampening creatures that interfered with their telepathic abilities. Even the Kree, despite their pride in military tradition, had begun to reconsider their approach to planetary conquest. General Thox9 had submitted a formal request for human advisors to help establish peaceful contact with the energy beings that had forced the Kree to abandon 3 strategic star systems. The idea that cooperation might be more effective than conquest was slowly gaining acceptance, even among the galaxy's most aggressive species. The transformation was not without its challenges. Some human colonies struggled to adapt to the presence of powerful predators in their midst. A few incidents occurred when colonists treated plasma lizards as servants rather than partners, leading to temporary breakdowns in communication. Jake and his team traveled frequently to provide training and guidance on proper interaction protocols. The key, Jake had learned, was genuine respect for the creature's intelligence and autonomy. Plasma lizards could sense condescension or attempts at manipulation through their bioelectric sensitivity. They responded only to humans who approached them as equals with honest intentions and emotional sincerity. This requirement had actually improved human colonial practices, forcing settlers to develop more empathetic and sustainable approaches to planetary development. As Jake watched the sun set over the crystal formations that surrounded the research center, Spark approached and settled beside him with a contented rumble. The massive lizard's scales glowed softly in the fading light, casting gentle patterns of gold and blue across the observation deck. Other plasma lizards had gathered nearby, some playing with human children who had grown up knowing these creatures as friends rather than monsters. The story of Jake Morrison and Spark had become legendary throughout human space, inspiring countless others to approach unknown species with empathy rather than fear. Children learned about plasma lizards in school not as dangerous predators to be avoided, but as intelligent partners who had helped humanity expand across the galaxy. The creatures appeared in human art, literature, and music as symbols of the unexpected friendships that could develop between different forms of life. Jake reflected on how a single moment of compassion had changed the course of galactic civilization. He had not set out to revolutionize interspecies relations or challenge the fundamental assumptions of alien contact protocols. He had simply seen a creature in distress and offered help without expecting anything in return. That simple act of kindness had revealed a truth that more advanced species had missed, sometimes the most sophisticated. Technology was an open heart and an extended hand. As Spark dozed peacefully beside him, Jake smiled at the thought of all the wonders that remained to be discovered in the galaxy. If humans could form partnerships with plasma lizards, what other impossible friendships might be waiting among the stars?